Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, November 2nd, 2023. Time for another show, and time for me to thank everyone once again who chimed in and offered to provide blue sky codes for people who were looking to make the switch. I had so many offers, I can't accept all the offers because I don't have enough people seeking codes. But anyway, I do appreciate it, and I want to sort of put together an informal list of people that we can call on who regularly will have codes available to share. I mean, it's been a trickle. Most of the people, I think, who wanted the codes early on have gotten them. But thank you to everybody. Mighty OCD chiming in this morning. Oh, let's see. We had Arch Pundit join the group yesterday. I should scroll back and just give thanks to everybody who chimed in and said that they would participate in that. And I don't know. Let's see. Oh, there's probably about 5 or 6 people who have offered. I think everybody who needs a code has gotten a code at this point. And so that's pretty nice. And, some of these people were chiming in on, what's the other one? Blue Sky, and some of them on Mastodon and everywhere. And it's odd that we're, of course, using all these other online social media fora to trade the codes for the other one, but it's time to move on from there. So anyway, thanks to all who have offered, and there are many of you, and I'm sure I've missed a few of you who maybe chimed in the afternoon after the show was over. But now it has been a couple of hours. Here we are. Here's some more. Egregious over at Blue Sky has offered some as well. I mean, look, there's a long list of people who are interested in stepping up and helping you. So if by any chance, if you know someone, if you yourself are on Blue Sky, but I don't know, your mom wants to get on Blue Sky, whatever it is, Dr. the Frog, Skip Bitter has chimed in as well. I don't know. I think we might have gotten to everybody at this point, but if you have offered and you haven't had your name called, by all means, chime in again. I got to go back and put this list on paper somewhere because otherwise I'll lose it somewhere along the way. Anyway, okay, so much happening today. We're still learning more things about the mystery Speaker of the House of Representatives. That's interesting. I guess the most inexplicable for the moment, and I imagine it'll only take a few minutes for him, during the workday today to explain it. But I guess yesterday, whose story was it? Daily Beast, maybe? I don't know. Who knows anymore? I put it aside, but I believe I got it from somebody from whom I have run out of articles to read for the month. Although, it is November 2nd. Maybe I can go back and check in on these things. Anyway, the Daily Beast, I think. Does the new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, have a bank account? That is a weird question, but apparently, he became Speaker of the House. People thought, all right, we should go read his financial disclosure because important now. It wasn't important then, I guess. Nobody in Louisiana ever read his financial disclosures. It's amazing how much he can get away with as a relatively obscure congressman. Member of Congress. There's not that many of them. There's more people in the New Hampshire legislature, as you know. But I guess nobody read it, and they went back and they looked, and I guess he doesn't declare ownership of a bank account, not a savings account, not a checking account, nothing. And I mean, it could be as simple, although a little bit weird for a fundamentalist Christian, to have everything in his wife's name. Maybe, I don't know. It's I imagine that would be the sort of dodge you would engage in. I mean, it would raise serious questions. Nothing that would get him expelled or thrown out of office or anything, but it would raise serious questions particularly for the fundamentalist Christians who believe the man is the head of the household. For him to say, the approach would probably be, well, I'm the one in the public eye. I'm the one whose financial disclosures they'll be scrutinizing to make sure I don't have any weird conflicts of interest. And I'm sure I do. But we'll put everything in your name and you won't make a financial disclosure. And I'll just simply say I don't have, but hiding a bank account. I mean, no one says you have a financial conflict of interest with Bank of America if that's where you keep your bank account, really. But anyway, so that seems pretty weird. And I mean, he's a full-on grown-up human being. Most of them have bank accounts. I assume it would be foolish of me to now guess that we won't be hearing strange lectures from him about how come budget time, we need to sit down, just like regular Americans do, sit around the kitchen table and work out their family budget. I mean, for a guy who has no bank account, I don't think that's going to hold a lot of sway. Oh, I didn't test my Skype this morning, so it's not like working properly. So I see it's ringing on my desktop or my laptop, but not the desktops. Okay, here's what I got to do. Hold on, Greg. I know it's frustrating, but I'm supposed to test this thing every morning, and there's the notice that it's not working correctly. How about that? All right. So what I usually do is, here we go. Now the second time around it'll ring just fine. Okay, here we go. The one time, in the last, well, actually it's not that. I guess it's the second time in the last couple of weeks that I had neglected to. Just one of the things you got to do as you start everything up is use the Skype test call and listen to the recording every morning. And it never fails. When you test, it's fine. Nothing's wrong with it. And then the day you don't test, I guess that's what warms it up. It wakes it up as you run a test call on it. And then on days like this, the second call does it just fine. Anyway, so like a late trick-or-treater, we've got it all fixed here. Good morning, Greg. You have a bank account, don't you?
I think so.
Okay, and, good. Yeah, see, I thought most people did.
It's still adult Halloween. We're still eating the candy from
yeah, good.
days ago.
And you can, if you wanted to, if you could find a buyer, you could sell it and put the cash in your bank account in your name, and everybody would know about that. No, you can't, because it's not there.
Well,
we'll
he
find
uses the generic Republican bank account.
Oh.
He learned that trick from George Santos.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, it's probably got a regular-ish explanation bill, not a great one. But by this afternoon, he has a bank account and it's over here.
Of all the interesting things about him, that's not one of them.
No. It's just, what made it interesting was, well, one, just like, what? You don't have a bank account. And two, yes, they'll usually lecture you about how if we just treated the government's finances like everyday family finances, and then he doesn't do that. And then, of course, other stories, which we may get to, which might be more interesting, about his record of, helming ultra-conservative causes that then get run into the ground, declare bankruptcy amid recriminations about corruption and financial improprieties, and then never actually launch.
Well, basically,
that's weird too.
If you want to sum him up, he's a bad guy with a good chance of getting the Democrats to retake the House.
Yes.
Which I think is fantastic.
Yeah. And it's cool that there's a harpist in the show.
Yeah.
As well. That's a new addition to the show. Okay. Is that a ringtone?
It is.
Okay. I don't think I know that one. All right. I'm going to look for my harp ringtone on my phone now.
Yeah. Well, you should. So I'm going to start with something a little different because I don't think we cover it enough.
Right. What is it?
And that is the U.A.W. strike.
Yes. Well, you have mentioned it a couple of times.
Well, it exists.
It's not enough.
I'm a big union supporter, and it turns out the U.A.W. won big. They still have to have everything ratified, I think, but nonetheless, they won. And what did they win? Let me just explain a little bit about what was going on here and what the implications are. Yeah, so this is from the New Yorker.
They know all about
It's a piece
cars.
by John Cassidy. What the U.A.W. won. After all, that's what we want to cover.
Well, yes.
Enforcing the big three automakers to pay higher wages and make other concessions, the union demonstrated the enduring power of organized labor. So that's a good thing.
Okay. Yeah. I mean,
I come from a union family, so
right.
I'm all in.
Yeah, we're
so Sean Fain, the leader of the U.A.W., hailed the outcome of the strike. And going into the strike, John Cassidy writes, the media attention, oh boy, everybody wants me today, focused on four of the U.A.W.'s basic demands.
All right, one was for a phone.
Sharply higher wages.
Right. An Oral-B toothbrush.
Including the restoration of automatic cost of living adjustments.
Okay.
The elimination of a two-tier pay system that was introduced more than 15 years ago, a pathway to unionize new electric vehicle plants.
Okay.
And the restoration of defined pensions and health insurance for union retirees.
All right. I think I can.
In the first three areas, the union appears to have achieved what it wanted. Only in the area of retiree benefits did the auto companies manage to hold the line.
Yes. Retiree. Okay. Oh, well, that's too bad.
Right? So under the new labor contract, and this is pretty good, which served as the model for Stellantis and GM, fully vested production line workers will receive cumulative hourly pay increases of about 27%.
That is a lot of percent.
That's more than the price of eggs goes up. And some members of skilled trades will receive raises of more than 30%. That'll cover their gas costs.
Yeah, holy cow. All right.
All union members will also receive annual cost of living adjustments based on the rate of consumer price inflation. Taken together, these provisions will raise the top hourly wages of Ford production workers from 32.05 cents to 42.60 cents in the course of the contract, which will run until 2028. Hey. And the hourly wages of skilled workers from $36.96 to $50.97, the union said. So they won big.
Yeah, it is good news. And, remember that. I mean,
remember, Joe Biden was taking a risk by walking that picket line.
Yes. And here's the risk he was taking. It was the amazing thing. What this means, of course, is that for years on end in the past, the automakers have been fully capable of operating at a profit, paying all their executives, taking care of their shareholders, and paying their workers 25 to 30% more than they were paying them, but they just weren't.
Yes, exactly. So we're going to get to that too, and with a piece from Greg Sargent. But this one points out the agreement will also shorten the time it takes for new hires to be paid full wages. So under a two-tier pay system that was introduced in 2007, newer Ford workers received roughly half as much pay as older workers, and it took them 8 years to make up the difference. Going forward, new hires get paid 85% of the top rate after 2 years and 100% after 3.
Hey, all right.
That's a big gain.
Yeah, and I think
between now and October 2025, some Ford workers will see their hourly wages double.
I've been wondering where all the money from making all these cars was going.
Yeah. So given that last year GM and Ford each made more than $10 billion in operating income, it was always going to be difficult for them to resist the UAW's wage demands. But what's perhaps more surprising is the company's willingness to make concessions on unionizing electric vehicle plants. Now, that's important because, remember, Donald Trump claimed he was going to talk to the workers. He never did. Oh. He went and talked to the owners, and he talked at a non-union shop.
Right.
And said Biden's plan of introducing electric vehicles is going to kill you all. You have to elect me.
Oh.
Everything Trump said was garbage. Everything.
Yeah, how about that?
Every single thing.
How would you?
Well, but, it turned out that, the transition to electric vehicles is real. Climate change is real.
Yeah.
We're seeing hurricanes all of a sudden hit Acapulco with almost no warning.
Yes,
because they incredibly intensify in the last 24 hours before they hit shore.
Right.
That's because of climate change.
Oh.
And moving to electric vehicles is part of the solution, if there is a solution to be had.
Yeah.
And, the U.S. is helping America get there. Biden is directing that, very future-oriented. Yeah, he's old, but look what he's doing.
And he doesn't care about whale cancer from windmills, though. That's rotten.
Right. Now, the only thing that the union didn't get out of the big three are guaranteed, because they do get cost of living increases, which had been out. Now it's in. And in again, I should say. The only thing they didn't get totally that they wanted is retirement benefits. Ford agreed to increase the 401k contribution by roughly 10% for older workers, but the new contract doesn't include the restoration of defined benefit pension and retiree health insurance for all employees. That wasn't surprising. In 2009, the hefty cost of retirement benefits was one of the factors that prompted GM and Chrysler to file for bankruptcy. So they don't want to restore the old system. I get that.
They'll certainly be scared of that. Well, at least that has a credible threat of endangering the corporation, where you can make it clear. Well, we went down this road and it didn't.
It didn't work for us. We're not doing it again.
But the wages, no, you can afford
So
that.
we'll get everything else. Look, we'll pay you. You get your own insurance. Now that Obamacare is there, it's affordable. It's not like the old days.
Yes, that's true, too. So we can help out. And once again, a good time to point out that's a big subsidy to corporations that would otherwise probably be forced to find ways to pay for that. But
well, they
we'll
wanted
take
it
care of
both ways. They get the
instead.
subsidy, but then again, they don't want to pay the workers. So
Yeah,
that's
so
why they were
now
making so much money.
Now we got
And
the money.
the fact that the whole healthcare system has changed with Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act was enormously a BFD, as Joe Biden once said.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's a great segue over to this side of it. You wonder, in years past, a strike like that, asking for 30% wage increase, you'll never get that. That's crazy. Well,
and they said, okay, we'll take 5%, but instead you got to pay for our health insurance.
Right.
And reluctantly, the automakers said, all right. And it turned out the workers won big on that because healthcare was so expensive. Now with Obamacare, they can afford to say, okay, you keep your healthcare, give us the money.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, who thought that was going to be? I mean, it came up during the debates, like, well, it'll free up employers to do all sorts of other investment in other areas or raise wages and people can pay. And it was kind of abstract, but here it is, played out in real life and in a big way that makes headlines because so many workers are involved in such prominent unions. Well, it's a story. Well, that seems like a story.
Well, it is.
Yeah. Well,
but here's the thing. Do you remember when the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, passed?
No.
March 2010.
Oh. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
It does seem like
the current year?
Ago, though. It's not March.
No, but it's 2023. I mean,
That's
it took
right.
13 years. It took 13 years to see the benefits of what the debate was at the time about what Obamacare was going to do for industry.
Yes. Well, that was the idea of it, too. I mean, we hoped for it to be
So that's
sooner,
the problem
but
politically. You put stuff in place, you tell people it's good, they don't believe you till they see it, and then they see it a decade later.
Right.
Obama did that. Biden is doing that. You're not going to see it for a while. The Infrastructure Act takes time for stuff to get built, although you do hire people to build it along the way.
Yes.
But unless you have those big signs saying, this road project is brought to you by Joe Biden, people don't know.
Yeah. Yes, that's true. And sometimes they come up with those signs. But, yeah, that's true. It was a long-run sort of a thing. That was part of the design of the play, too, was, of course, we'll force it through here, and then
eventually
in the short-term thing, people will start getting insured, and then they'll say, now I can't afford to see this thing repealed.
And that's exactly what happened with John McCain's thumbs down.
That's right.
So everything they said is true, and still skeptical people say, I don't believe the Democrats are doing stuff for us. I don't see it. I don't feel it. This egg cost 3 cents more than last week.
Yeah, and the other guy,
and that's why sometimes you bang your head against the desk and say,
COVID.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Everything is cheaper than it was. It's just more expensive than it also was. But it depends upon when you're looking. I know how it feels. But if you're doing a vibes election, let me tell you about what's actually happening in the reality-based community here.
Yeah, maybe you'll vibe differently if you find that out. I don't know. A lot of people won't.
But labor wins. Labor gets big raises. That's a vibe.
Right. That's true. And now would be a great time to.
And why did they win? Because Obamacare. We did that.
Yeah.
Run on it.
Right. I agree. That all will make a powerful message for people who have their ears open. It would be interesting. Biden should go to the non-union shop that Trump went to and say, "Hey, how'd you do in all of that? I heard you hear that thing. Everything Trump touches dies. The other guys who are building the same cars as you, more or less, are they're getting a big raise. How'd you do?"
But they'll do okay. See, here's the thing, and this happened way back in places like Rochester, New York.
I guess all
in the old days, unions only had to strike one of the camera plants. Because once they got a raise, all the non-union plants would raise their wages because they didn't want you to unionize. So it was a ripple effect.
I guess there's that. That's true. Oh, yeah. So maybe it won't be as powerful.
I'm old enough to remember that stuff.
Okay. So, they may
cameras?
do well, too. Cameras. Oh, yeah.
I
think that was
into your phone.
Didn't they fold into the buggy makers union at some point?
Yeah, the whip maker.
Right. So, Yeah.
Well, there's a niche for that. It's not the same as it used to be with horse and buggies.
Right, true. That never did come back. Even with the Amish, it was
Well, it did, but in a different way. But we won't go there. It's a family show. So this is from Greg Sargent. Well, okay. The auto workers' big win exposes the absurdity of Trump's populism.
Yeah.
Though UAW members must ratify the agreements, the provisions would constitute their largest gains in decades. We talked about that.
All right.
Again and again, UAW's president, Shawn Fain, has stressed that this strike is not just about his workers' bottom lines, but about the country's class structure. Nope. He regularly lambastes the dramatic upward redistribution of wealth of the past few decades.
Yeah, that's not good.
Blaming top-down assaults on workers' bargaining power and the systematic erosion in wages they brought. The billionaire class, he said, has spent decades convincing workers we're weak, it's futile to fight. You will all be assimilated, and that the workers should be grateful for the scraps that they decide to give us.
Yeah, they had everybody convinced
of that for a while. This strike is about defeating an idea, that what's good for the wealthy is synonymous with what's good for our country because it showers benefits on everyone else.
Yeah.
Now, again, there's an old Broadway show, Little Abner.
Okay.
Don't know if you're familiar with it.
Well, I'm not that familiar with it, but I'm aware of its existence.
There's two songs from that musical that are just wonderfully relevant now.
Okay.
Okay. One of them is The Country's in the Very Best of Hands, where they talk about the fact that, everybody in Congress is just doing all these weird stuff, and let me explain it to you regular people, which is a wonderful song. But the other one is a theme. It's not really a song, but a theme, a motif, if you will, that goes throughout the show. The villain is a really super wealthy guy named General Bull Moose. And the whole idea is what's good for General Bull Moose is good for the USA. That's the motif. And so he's one of these super rich guys who tries to run everything and, buys his way into this, that, and everything else. But it's the same idea. What's good for the rich is good for the country. That's not necessarily true for us regular folks.
No.
And that's the other theme in Little Abner that's relevant today.
Yeah. Okay.
So Dogpatch USA went on strike, and they won.
Good job. Well done. This was a big deal. Yes.
Yeah. The labor movement has been most successful when it embodies the larger aspirations and values of working people throughout society. Damone Silvers, the former political director of AFL-CIO, told me, Greg Sargent, he said, Fain made the strike about inequality, wage stagnation, the rich getting everything, the fundamental problem that's been growing in the U.S. economy for 50 years. And President Biden told a similar story when he visited strikers in late September. But this is not the story Trump and other right-wing populists tell. Speaking in Detroit, Trump attacked the big three, but criticized their investments in electric vehicles, insisting Biden's policies, which incentivize the transition to decarbonized vehicles, would destroy the auto industry. And J.D. Vance agreed. The main enemy is Biden's premature transition to electric vehicles. Unfortunately for Trump and Vance, the striking workers are showing otherwise.
What's premature about the transition to electric? I mean, people want to buy them, so you make them.
Because assembling electric vehicles requires fewer workers than making gas-powered cars. And the big automakers manufacture electric vehicle batteries domestically in partnership with foreign companies, keeping the plants outside UAW contracts and resulting in lower wages. But that's what the striking workers have been trying to address, and they appear to be having some success.
Well, all right then.
The Times reports that Ford and GM at battery plants will soon be covered by the new UAW contracts, which suggest that some EV-related gigs will be union jobs with benefits.
What?
Now, Gene Sperling, senior economics advisor to Biden and the White House's point person on the negotiations, said the agreement refutes virtually every conservative critique of a new auto feature made in America. The UAW even made serious gains on ensuring future EV battery jobs are strong, middle-class union jobs. So what the future holds, nobody knows exactly, but Fain and Biden are basically approaching it and saying, we have to at least wrestle with the future. Here's the things that we're going to do.
Okay.
So
no one knows
again,
exactly, but
Biden has to say, yeah, you think I took a risk by working on the picket line? It was the only thing to do. It's something I had to do. I wanted to do it, but I had to do it. I had to do it, but I wanted to do it.
They made me do it.
I made me do it because this is a BFD. And not only does it recognize the power of unions, it recognizes the importance of making sure that people who left behind start to readjust the equation that gave everything to the rich and gave nothing to the poor. And so that's why I'm there. And for all of you people complaining that you've been left behind, one guy talks about it. I'm doing something about it.
That might work. I don't know. Well, they have to listen first.
I don't know. He's going to a rural area today, Biden is, and he's going to talk about some of that stuff.
Why doesn't he go to rural? Oh, he's going to a rural area.
Yeah, I don't know if he's going to a diner. But
why not? Why not? Why isn't he then? Huh?
Yeah.
Where's his bank account?
Bill Clinton would go there and eat your French fries, and you'd love him.
That's true.
Why
did
he's
that
not
work?
Bill Clinton.
No. Okay. Well, that is exciting. There's a lot of intertwined storylines there.
Yeah, but they're all important. And again, yes. I think we don't necessarily pay it enough justice, but that's what campaigns are for. The whole thing about looking at polls at this particular point in time, Biden's holding his own, but there's no campaign. He's running against perfection. He's holding his own barely, but the campaign hasn't started yet. And one of the things that campaigns do is highlight this stuff. Now, you're going to tell me that people who got their wages doubled under Biden are going to say he's not doing anything for us? Union people are going to go out and talk to their families. They're going to talk to other people in their communities.
Will they? Will they?
Yeah, they will.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, there's a whole structure for them to do that. Water coolers and breaks and whatnot. It's all built in
places like Michigan, even Ohio. Which won't necessarily help Biden, but it may help a Senate race,
Yeah, well, when are they going to have a Senate race to get rid of the guy who said that this was such a terrible thing? What's his name? J.D. Vance. Okay, well, he gets to hang around.
But Sherrod Brown gets to run.
That's true. And he seems to have something of a connection with these fellows.
Yeah, exactly right.
At the factory type plants.
More after the break, but
yes.
Other stuff.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we have to get back to Congress.
I could disappear between now and the time we come back.
Well, we'll do the Senate first,
okay?
We don't have to concentrate on the House all the time.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Breaking news. My mom is listening. That's not news to me. I knew that, but it's news to Greg. And so she's sent me a lengthy text about the origin of General Bull Moose and Lil Abner and what it was a spoof of, and giving us a historical background. It's a lengthy text. I'll get to it later. Maybe on the show, maybe not. I don't know.
I hope so.
I don't want to interrupt the flow, but this is for you. All right. Well, anyway.
Thank you. So hi, David's mom. Thank you so much for that, and thanks for remembering Little Abner. It really was a great show. Very sexist in its time and all of that, but awesome. The whole thing was a spoof.
Yes. So I don't know enough about it to say whether that was a good excuse or not, but certainly a product of its time. Okay. But we can explore the historical background of the spoof at some point. It's always worth doing.
Yeah, well, it's always worth remembering things like Little Abner and Pogo and, Herblock and some of the great cartoonists and political cartoonists of that era. They did great stuff. But moving on.
Yes.
We're going to talk about Congress. And for a change, we're going to talk about the Senate rather than the House.
Oh, no. All right.
Andrew Desiderio,
yeah.
Andrew
That's a tricky one.
Says, we expected fireworks, not a carpet bombing, because Senate Democrats were looking for GOP defense hawks to go after Tommy Tuberville on the floor.
No good.
But they skewered him for 4.5 hours. They didn't get anywhere, but this is one of those investments in time that may pay off later.
Yes.
Each time they brought up another one of the military people that Tuberville is blocking, people like Lindsey Graham and Dan Sullivan, who was leading the whole charge, would say, you're destroying our military capability. You're harming these American heroes. And Tuberville kept saying, well, you know, my party's behind me. This is 4.5 hours of you're a liar.
Like it was his party saying,
it was his party doing all of this.
Interesting.
And he refused to budge.
Why did they do this?
But Schumer said that he's going to go to Rules Committee and see if he can get something passed that basically this one time, Jack Reed from
just this one time.
Rhode
Island, yes.
And Kirsten Sinema from nowhere.
Rhode Island.
Have gotten together and written here's a suggestion. What we do, if we can get it through rules, is this one time we're going to pass all of the military people en bloc. It won't have repercussions for precedent because we're only doing it this one time, but we're doing it this one time. And basically this is what happens when a senator abuses his privileges. And rather than it being a Democratic attack, yesterday showed there's a lot of Republicans that might be on board with this. It might actually happen.
Yeah. So, what I have gathered up, I didn't watch the fiasco, but I did see some people shouting about it while it was happening. But, yeah, of course, Tuberville has blocked all of these, just every military promotion that comes down the pike. And then I think he said the problem with moving past his blockade was it could be done, but it's very time consuming, and he was going to make it be time consuming, and no one wanted to do that. But then all of a sudden, the Republicans, who haven't been doing a great deal to push him on this, decided, all right, well, we'll test him out. Like he says he's going to block us from doing it all on block, but he would have no objection to our doing it one at a time. And then, well, that turned out to be a lie because he stood up and objected to one at a time. So for hours on end, they would bring up a senior officer's name who was up for a big promotion and talk about how great that person was and how much they deserved promotion, and ask unanimous consent to handle that promotion and to consider it passed. And he would stand up each time. I object.
Well, so Steve Bennett writes, the question was what it would take to tip the scales. The answer, evidently, was an apparent heart attack.
Yeah. That's
Earlier this week, General Eric Smith, the Marine Corps commandant, who was also the assistant commandant, was hospitalized on the heels of complaints he was struggling with an unsustainable workload. The general was shouldering the responsibilities of two related jobs, leading to 18-hour days as a direct consequence of Tuberville's radical tactics.
Oof.
A Politico report added that while Pentagon officials have stopped short of blaming Tuberville for Smith's medical emergency, they conceded the stress of doing two extremely demanding jobs at once for months certainly didn't help his health.
It could not have. 18-hour days.
So AP says Republican senators angrily challenged Senator Tommy Tuberville on his blockade of almost 400 military officers Wednesday evening, taking over the Senate floor for more than 4 hours to call for individual confirmation votes after a months-long stalemate. The conservative Washington Times described it as a GOP revolt. And, clearly in dramatic ways, they said, you're a jerk.
Yeah, well, they should.
Which reminds me, and hopefully we'll get to at least some of this, there were two significant people you may have heard of deaths yesterday.
Yes.
One of them is A.D. Barkan, who is the ALS health advocate.
Yeah.
Which to me, is the more important of the two, but also Bobby Knight.
Yes, I think that is the more important. The one that was on the radio was Bobby Knight. But
yeah, well, the point is you can be a successful coach and still be a jerk.
True.
Hello, Tommy Tuberville.
Was he even a successful coach? He was a coach.
Bobby
I'm aware
Knight
of that.
or Tuberville?
No, Tuberville.
Yeah,
I don't know how good he was.
Well, he was good enough to get himself elected.
Yes, that's true. I don't know what that means.
Because the only thing he had going for him is he was a football coach.
Yes, right. But Alabama, so, Alabama loves football, yada, yada.
Not like Texas. But
of course, they also generally love Marine generals.
You'd think.
Very frequently, too. That very interesting that that's how he got himself in trouble. Bobby Knight, right, made all the news. A.D. Barkan, lots of glowing tributes in the papers, certainly. But I don't know. It's not like radio news. You have 10 seconds for news in between songs, and they went with Bobby Knight on that one.
Yeah. Bobby Knight threw a chair, and Eddie Barkin got it covered because he made sure that Obamacare was there so that when you got hit by the chair, at least it got paid for.
Right. Or if you hurt your back throwing the chair, something like that. Right. So he was looking out for you. Bobby Knight was having a tantrum, but Eddie Barkin was looking out for him anyway. Yeah. Because he cared about people.
Right. Now, Bobby Knight cared about his own people.
Yes. True. I mean, and that was his job. And that was 80's job,
he did some good things in the sense that if you were on his team, everybody got treated equally.
Yes.
He didn't have stars. It was a team effort. That was what made him, win.
Okay.
And that's why people recognized him. And it's only been 24 hours since he died, so therefore you're supposed to say nice things for 24 hours, and then you can, dump on them all you want.
Sure. I don't even know if I
only with some
bad
exceptions.
Stories about him either. It was just sort of like it's the news thing. Like this guy, fought to get health care for everybody, and he made the gigantic win in the union strike we just talked about possible. And Bobby Knight, basketball is cool.
Never mind
that's
that.
great. And all,
March Madness and the Superb Owl.
Yes. Right.
That's what really matters.
Right. That's why we pay the coaches at big state schools. And we don't pay the teachers anything.
But I see the tie into Tuberville because, just because you're a winning coach doesn't mean that, you play by the rules.
Right.
Because a lot of coaches get in trouble for recruiting violations, and it doesn't mean you're a nice guy.
Right. Or that anybody cares about your football once you move on to the next career. Sorry, we don't actually care.
So the difference, of course, is Bobby Knight is famous, and they talk about him on the news, and everybody talks about the fact that he was really angry and threw chairs, and he won a lot of games. And Eddie Barkin died, and there were glowing tributes because he was just a wonderful person who did great things for everybody that you don't even know about.
Yeah.
So there you have it.
Yep. Highly recommend that you parse through some of these things. My own thing about Eddie Barkin is that I mean, I didn't know him, but he was, I think, so influential in the healthcare fight that I didn't stop to pay any real attention to what he was doing beyond saying, everybody I know says this guy knows everything there is to know about it. Sign me up for whatever it is he backs. And as a result, I don't know him.
He's in a wheelchair, so it's not like he can fade in the background. You're going to notice him.
Oh yeah, and he made full use of that. He's really turned. He's struck by this terrible illness, and a lot of people could say turn away from that any sort of public activity and say, well, I have other priorities right now. And he really made the fact that he was going through this a personal story that everybody could understand and sympathize with, and then get behind him as he's saying, and I'm using the time that I've got to fight for, not just for myself, but for everybody similarly situated or who may find that they are. And that's the importance of passing a bill like this one, is you don't know what is in your future or what is waiting for you. You
could be suddenly hit by a chair from an angry coach.
That's true too. It could be anything.
Could be anything.
And the realistic thing to do is to say, let's plan to make sure that everybody who's just going about their own business and one day falls ill is maybe got a chance in life and can take care of themselves and their families. But, he was, by most accounts, a most remarkable figure. I did put away one thing in that I can kind of quickly mention was I saw a Blue Sky, maybe, communique issued by David Dayen, who is another person you should always listen to.
Yep.
Who just
D-Day on the old Daily Post.
and who has just briefly put it this way on notice that Eddie Barkin had died. He said, I don't have a lot of heroes, but Eddie was one of them. And that's really something. He says, I knew him and worked with him before his diagnosis and after, completely indefatigable, and before his turn to healthcare policy really changed the Fed's, the Federal Reserve Bank's direction on full employment. Interesting other part of his background. There were a number of areas of social justice in general that he was tremendously active well before he became a healthcare advocate, for which he was most famous. So life well lived, no doubt about that. So I thought that was an interesting, and I'm going to do a little bit more poking around in the background of pre-healthcare days, just to see what an amazing guy he really was.
Yeah, but we're going to move from the sublime to the ridiculous, because now we're going to talk about the House and George Santos.
Oh, all right. Fair game.
I don't know if you're aware of this.
I am not.
But there are occasions that in the House they play politics.
What?
Well, you have this guy, George Santos, who's an obvious crook, liar, Munchausen, fabulist, crook.
Munchausen? Really?
Shyster.
Okay. Yeah.
Gonif.
Right.
Right? Everything.
Yeah.
So a while back, Democrats said, we got to get rid of him. And I can't remember exactly, but I suspect what happened is that motion was tabled.
Yeah.
So then Republicans in New York looked around and said, he's even worse than we thought. There's 13 superseding indictments. He's making us all look bad. We got to get rid of him.
Yes.
And the new speaker,
the New Yorkers thought
the horrible Mike Johnson.
Johnson, if that is his real name.
If that's his real name, said, we can't do that. I need the votes.
Okay.
So the New Yorkers sort of started lobbying their fellow Republicans to get rid of him, and it was getting some momentum. And the Ethics Committee, which isn't supposed to play politics, stepped in and said, well, we're going to issue a report on or about November 17th, I think was the date.
Oh, shutdown day. But they just
announced that yesterday.
Oh, all right.
So some Republicans backed off and said, well, there are procedural issues. We really ought not take this vote until ethics decides what they're going to do and or his court case is settled. Yeah,
and I am partially sympathetic to that.
And so were Democrats. That's the interesting part of the story. What went from this might get the 2/3 needed to pass went to a final vote of 179 to 213 with around 30 Democrats voting with the Republicans to not do this at this time.
I'm going to look up.
Some of them, like Jamie Raskin, said, well, it's a procedure issue. We really ought not act until ethics has done their thing first. That's the way it's supposed to work.
Like if he gets convicted, come back and see me.
Okay, that's what they said.
All right.
And I'm thinking, what about the New Yorkers who are Republicans want to get rid of them because he's a millstone around their neck, and the Democrats are saying, okay.
Yeah,
we'll keep him.
Well, right.
So how much of it, of what they claim is procedural, is actually politics?
Okay. That's a good question.
How do we know? Because there was another thing that came up, and that was going to be a Marjorie Traitor Green sponsored, whatever you call it. We're going to yell at censure of Tlaib.
Sort of. Right. Yes. She's
Which, by the way,
about
didn't pass.
No.
Oh. And why? Because some Republicans voted, I don't want to do this at this time. Partly because there's a Santos-Tlaib tit for tat that we don't want to get into.
Okay.
They said publicly. And privately, they're thinking, I wouldn't get rid of Menendez either.
Okay.
Why not take this millstone and hang it around their neck?
Yeah.
That's what I mean about sometimes politics is played in the House. I don't know how much of that played into it because they're not saying. But that's the point. They're not saying, but
And there's no opportunity to say even if you want. And I guess if somebody asks you, you just say, you look over there.
Yeah. So anyway, what do you think?
Yes, it's definitely some of that. No doubt about that. I did see that Marjorie Traitor Green was big mad about things. Where did I see that? Somebody retweeting something or taking here we are. How does it, we'll say this out loud here. The person's username is 3fecta, which I don't know whether they say trifecta when they say it out loud, but just shorter than tri is the number 3. 3fecta, pointing out this screen grab of Marjorie Traitor Green's latest screed. Oh, look at this. Here's an unusual thing. I enlarged it to read it, and the alt text, which we're all encouraged to use, pops up and gets in the way. Is it just I think it's maybe just it's the same text. So good. So she's tweeting because she still uses that evil system to do the bulk of her communications. You voted to kick me out of the Freedom Caucus. Remember that even happened?
Yeah.
But CNN wannabe Ken Buck she's mad at Ken Buck.
Oh, we got more Ken Buck stuff.
And she also takes another shot at her other big rival. You keep CNN wannabe Ken Buck and vaping, groping Lauren Boebert. She's keeping that story alive. And you voted with the Democrats to protect, as she calls her, wink, wink, terrorist slave.
MTG starring in the latest remake of Mean Girls.
Yeah, so she's mad about that. She's mad about
everything. She's mad
that
her browser was buffering and didn't open fast enough for her.
And something, January 6th defendants, yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. But I guess he's mad. She's actually, I think, responding to and mad at Chip Roy. So this is fun. They're all fighting. It's great.
Well, so the Republicans are fighting in the Senate. And the Republicans are fighting in the House. That's one of the reasons why I want to cover these stories.
Oh.
So obviously Dems in disarray, but look what's going on here. Yeah. So this is from the CNN story on Santos. Freshman representatives Nick LaLota, Anthony D'Esposito, Marcus Molinaro, Brandon Williams, and Mike Lawler signed the letter to get rid of him. These are all vulnerable members from New York's congressional delegation. And one of the interesting things that happened is in the debate in the afternoon leading up to the vote last night, with a space in between, Anthony D'Esposito was having a debate with Democrat Dan Goldman.
Ooh, I was waiting for that.
Dan Goldman
I don't know him.
was an impeachment not a manager. He was an impeachment lawyer. At the time, and then he got elected to Congress, and now he's in Congress. He's a representative. And Democrat Dan Goldman, very effective speaker.
That's right.
Was having this marvelous debate with Anthony D'Esposito about which one could make claims about Santos being the worst.
The worst
like it wasn't like anybody was defending Santos. They were having a debate as to who was going to be the better debater to point out what a rat Santos was.
That guy's terrible.
One topped the other. They just kept going and going. It was wonderful.
Fun. Well, good day for George Santos.
Right.
In the end, he's fine. Yeah. So I guess they actually got to. I'm looking at the roll call votes. So they actually did go to a vote on agreeing to a resolution expelling him, so they required
Remember, you
the
don't make
two-thirds
motions,
vote.
you make resolutions.
Yes, you move to consider the resolution, but that's about it. So, and they needed a 2/3 vote, and, they didn't even actually get, they lost outright, 179 to 213. Several people 19 voting present. That's interesting, too. I wonder whether that was more Republicans or Democrats.
No, there was on both sides. I was watching the vote.
Okay.
So there were people on both sides voting present. They didn't want to deal with this. And I think part of it, again, is the idea of process, and part of it is the idea of politics.
Yeah, 15 of them were Democrats, 4 of them were Republicans, and there were 11 no-shows exactly on both sides for a total of 22. So interesting. Everybody... That was a good day, so they rejected that. They rejected Marjorie Traitor Green's angry screed. I think there are a couple other things possibly in the works, but also playing into the politics of it all was part of the argument about, well, don't you think you should wait for a conviction first, was some threats from Freedom Caucus types and their near relations saying, well, if we're going to start expelling Republicans who haven't actually been convicted of things. There's a lot of Democrats who I suspect are guilty of some bad things. Maybe I will move to expel them. Not that any of those expulsion resolutions would work, but a threatened annoyance, et cetera, and some Democrats probably thought better of it.
If we're going to expel members because they're charged with a crime or accused of wrongdoing, that's a problem. Because we all are.
Maybe even me. Who knows? When they find out where I actually keep my money, that might be a bad thing. I don't know.
Right. Some Democrats also voiced concerns about getting ahead of the Ethics Committee, which issued a rare memo the day before, citing the depth of its investigation with 40 witnesses contacted and the issuance of 37 subpoenas. It also said the next steps of the committee's investigation would be announced November 17th. So
there's another thing.
Pretty clearly to me was Ethics Committee intervening in a political way, saying don't do this.
Yes.
Let's delay it for at least a week or two.
But at the same time saying, and our big announcement on what to actually do comes on government shutdown day. Not that you'll notice what we have to say at that point, and what a great time to bury it. Okay. So, yeah, people's minds will be elsewhere when they finally issue their report. But if it's a bombshell, they'll be invested in making sure everybody knows about it. So,
right.
If it's not a bombshell, that's something else.
Rashida Tlaib reprimand. The vote to table was 222 to 186.
Oh, so they table. Yeah, okay. I forgot to get to, all right, what was the nature of that vote? What did they actually do? Yeah, they didn't even give her a chance to get to a vote. Yeah, they don't like Marjorie Traitor Green in that place.
Yeah. So 23 Republicans broke with the party in voting to kill it.
Okay. Good. That's. I think I should take a look at who the roll call is for that one,
and some Republicans said they didn't want to waste time on partisan measures when there's legislative work to be done. So clearly something's up there. That's absolutely positively guaranteed not the reason. So something else is going on.
But it might just be, it comes down to, I just don't like or want to empower her, and she's becoming more marginalized and losing power as we speak. Let's just throw her another anchor.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Other things that are worth covering, maybe some election stuff. Again, we're getting closer to the Virginia election. Today is Thursday, so today, tomorrow, Saturday, and then early vote ends.
Yes. My plan for voting is Friday.
We are told to expect a red mirage in Virginia.
All right.
Because the same day vote will come first, and that's usually Republican. And then the early in-person vote comes, and it's somewhat Democratic. And then last comes the mail-in ballots, which is bigly Democratic, and that takes the longest to count.
Okay.
So in close races, you don't know who wins. You're going to have to wait.
Well, that's fraud, as you know.
If it's not close,
right.
not a big deal. But I'm just saying. So that's what people need to look for in Virginia. Kentucky and other stuff also happening. So we'll keep an eye on that.
I'm urged
and the
to
Ohio
vote early.
question 1 or whatever you call it.
Yes.
Issue 1.
Well, I have one question.
The BFD one.
That's it. Right. Yeah. The one they tried to game and get rid of and block and change the wording of and present a false picture of the other side.
And then the governor, Mike
ballot.
Wine, said, listen, vote against it the way we want, and I promise you I'll do something about this later at some time in some non-specified way.
Okay. Well, that sounds pretty specific and concrete. Should go along with them on that.
So I say Virginia should come out and vote, vote early and vote on election day, and don't give Glenn Youngkin the win he's looking for.
Yeah, well, we should definitely do that. Now I'm like, well, should I vote on election day to dampen the mirage, or should I vote early like all the Democratic activists are urging me to do? And I think I'll listen to them.
Vote early.
But yeah, so tomorrow when the production staff is working from home, we'll all go together and vote on the second to last day of early voting, which is pretty late.
Win the race and spoil the plan of Republicans who wanted vote early.
That's
to win
the
it for
key issue there. So, okay, we'll go and do that. And, good. All right. That'll be my voting plan. They come to the door and they keep asking me, what's my plan? And I keep saying, come on.
Right. I'm looking at the Hill right now just for a specific reason.
I promise
I'll get to. But the headline that caught my eye is RFK Jr. pulls more votes from Trump than Biden in a three-way race, which I think was the Quinnipiac poll. But again, too early. He got something like 22%, which is absurd. He's not going to get 22%. Polling's broken, and it's certainly broken this far out, so just don't pay attention. But, it was a fun headline.
Well, AI might be doing the polling.
The one that I was looking for is this from Max Burns, Bootgate and pudding fingers.
Yay, back to pudding fingers. All this boot stuff is drowning out the pudding.
Ron DeSantis became 2024's presidential punchline.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't even make fun of Mike Pence because it was much more fun to make fun of Ron DeSantis.
Right. And it's
terrific.
His boot fetish is weird. And
Pundit Roundup regulars calls him Ronnie Go-Go Boots.
Yeah, his first Go-Go boot, or his first boot gate, with those stupid white rubber ones. But there was supposedly an explanation for that. But his
shoes always have heels because he always wants to look taller.
Yeah.
And Nikki Haley said, I'm running for president, and if you can't run in heels, don't wear them.
Yeah, it was made for the women candidates to knock them down on that one. Good, all right. Well done. Yeah, he's a weirdo.
Right.
For
so
sure.
Through it all, DeSantis has remained committed to the idea if he just focuses on the issues, the voters will eventually come to their senses.
Yeah, it's substance.
But his issues aren't popular, so he's got this problem.
Right. And also, it's upside down and backwards for all Republican candidates. They're not interested in substance. What are you, crazy?
Right. And now, whether or not Max Byrne's right, DeSantis actually wears lifts in his boots isn't in itself a very important fact. Boots with heels and lifts inside?
Yeah.
They give him that extra quarter of an inch that makes the difference between Napoleon and a leader.
And it's not. It's a
and
couple inches.
The leader doesn't do as well as Napoleon, so I don't even know why you're doing this. But the media furor around yet another awkward DeSantis outing explains why his campaign has struggled so mightily to reboot itself you get that?
Yes.
Despite multiple expensive attempts. According to social media trends, Americans who searched for DeSantis during the past week were nearly 10 times more likely to click on a story about his footwear than they were to view any other news about him. For some of those users, DeSantis' scandal will be the only thing they read about him all month. Now, that's a life and death problem for DeSantis because his campaign has now become known almost exclusively for misfires. Putting fingers, weird laugh, these infinitely replayable media moments have consumed DeSantis' messaging operation. If they're shedding first round of staff, his new communications hires are clearly more focused on getting their boss booked than they are about whether those bookings actually advance the campaign. So now he's talking to CNBC and other places he refused to talk to before. Nobody cares. DeSantis' presidential hopes dimmed as his reputation for clownery rose. The problem is the damage he's doing to Florida. That's going to take a lot more to undo.
Yes, people live there. It's awful.
But, as far as his campaign goes, in the garbage, in the dumpster, with the fire.
Yes. What I mean is they're experiencing misery as a result of his being the governor, and that's awful. Right. People are stuck there.
Right. And there's no good news in the Middle East because there never is. But, if there's any good news, the Rafah border seems to be open. People are getting out of Gaza. And here's an Israeli readout of a discussion that Biden had with Netanyahu. Quote, Biden has gone so far as to suggest to Netanyahu he should think about lessons he would share with his eventual successor. And he let Netanyahu know, you got to think beyond yourself. Your time is limited.
Well, that's true. And it's true of everybody. Eventually your time comes to an end.
Right, but it's interesting for him to say it right to his face.
True. Very sly. Diplomatic. All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Greg had to go. Goodbye. He'll be back on Monday. It's Thursday. We kind of went out of the show as we frequently do. Well, running out of time at the top of the hour, and two, thinking it was Wednesday and he'll be back tomorrow, but he won't be because tomorrow's Friday. But he'll be back Monday. Don't panic, everybody. Let's see, and I think everything's still on track for coming back, next week and doing. One of these days, I got to take a little time away in the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks at some point, and take care of some other life business. Nothing drastic, but just got to schedule some time away, or I may actually just be I'm just going to dedicate myself to doing a worse job on editing the show post production. And just roll the product out a lot faster, but in rougher form, and get to work in the afternoons. But at any rate, just a warning because I haven't laid my plans yet. But when the day comes, it won't be a total surprise to you. But Greg asked on the way out, he's like, you should tell me what it is your mom sent about General Bull Moose. So let's look at that, just because it's always interesting to look at historical background. And then I can send on a link, and you can all look at it as well. But here's the deal. In case you either didn't get the reference, if you never heard of Lil Abner, and it's entirely possible that you have not. Generations have grown up since then, and I'm only vaguely aware of Lil Abner. It was kind of, sort of, I'm aware of the musical, but that's mostly because my dad was a big Broadway musical fan. My dad and my stepmom were huge into that for years, and so I saw a lot of Broadway revivals, which was kind of great cultural background, even though, growing up as a teenager in the let's say in the 80s, right? This is not relevant. This is dumb, in fact. But actually, I kind of enjoyed them. I mean, it's always nice to see a show put on, right? So that was good. And then years later, I realized, yeah, that's a part that you could easily have skipped. And yet I now have this sort of cultural knowledge that's important in, I don't know, in trivia contests or something like that. So let's see. Lil Abner was aware of, but no one was putting on a revival of Lil Abner at the time. So, but anyway, I heard the soundtrack, etc. So let's see. What's the deal here? The origin of General Bull Moose in Lil Abner was this. My mom sends. In 1953, President Eisenhower nominated Charles Wilson, the president of General Motors, to be his Secretary of Defense. Okay, makes some sense. He retained a huge stock position in GM. And I guess that's now sort of like a no-no, but people do it anyway. I guess it's now a yes again because of Donald Trump. But anyway, he retained his stock position in GM. How did Rex Tillerson do in Exxon when he was Secretary of State? Did he just keep that? That's a culturally relevant question that you now ask again because you're getting a background in Lil Abner. So anyway, Charles Wilson, nominated to be Secretary of Defense, kept his stock in GM. During his confirmation hearings, he was asked if he could make a decision that was bad for GM. Right, and it certainly could be one as Secretary of Defense. His response is still remembered forever, it's said. Or maybe you never heard of it in the first place, but if you did, you remembered, is a classic example of business arrogance. What's good for GM is good for America, right? So, okay, interesting. That's a good way of trying to get out of the thing there. Can you make a decision that's bad for GM? Why would I, when what's good for GM is good for America? Except, like Steve Scalise, it may be that he never said that. That's interesting. So here's a link. Now, the link comes from National Review, and they're terrible about most things. However, the link is here, and you can take a look at it for yourself. And maybe I'm not reading you the HTTP, but National Review. Let's see, a 2013 article. It looks like what's good for America. Something. Wilson, who had overseen GM's war production during World War II, said something very different. That he hadn't imagined the possibility, quote, because for years I thought what was good for our country was good for General Motors and vice versa. That's a little more nuanced, right? I think. Wilson was saying exactly the opposite, that the best thing he could do for General Motors would be to faithfully serve his country so that there was no conflict. Wilson understood that business can only flourish when the country does. Now you're getting the sense of, well, okay, you said it was from National Review. Yeah, that does sound kind of National Review-ish. It's a different spin, entirely possible, but interesting nonetheless. And sometimes it's the spin from the other side that takes hold and becomes the narrative. And sometimes it's poked fun at, etc. I mean, how many for years we were, like, how many of you remember that, well, this is a sort of an interesting tangent too. How many of you remember that Dan Quayle is fundamentally an idiot because he misspelled potatoes, or for various other reasons? But a good example of just what a dope he is he misspelled potato, right? And I mean, I remember the explanation of that, and I guess what you would have to call the truth of that. I mean, he did make that mistake, but not without prompting. As I recall, everybody was laughing at him. Potato, he put the extra E on the end. And like at first you said, well, but there's an extra E on the end when it's plural, potatoes, and maybe that's how he got confused. But apparently, I don't know, he was visiting a school or something, and he was asked to spell, he was participating in spelling exercise. I think they were writing it on the board. But my recollection is that he spelled it correctly, T-O, at the end, no E at the end. And that one of the kids in the class, or maybe, I don't know, somebody suggested, no, isn't there an E on the end? Because I guess they were thinking about the plural potatoes. And he actually like resisted it. Is it really? Is that, I think, no. And he put the E, like he was writing on the board, he put the E in and he was like, that doesn't look right. He actually recognized that was an error, but it became Dan Quayle doesn't know how to spell potato. And I mean, what do I care? It happens to people. He wasn't a particularly great politician, or I don't know, maybe he was a nice guy deep down, but he was in the meantime, he was putting himself in the position of trying to help run the country in a direction it shouldn't have been going. So we were, miffed about that. And anyway, so he was I don't know. He got to be the target of some bad press, but, that's the way it goes. I mean, Mike Dukakis isn't an idiot, even though he looked dopey with the helmet on. So, these things happen. But years later, apparently, he redeemed himself by telling Mike Pence that he also thought that bringing fake electoral vote certificates to the floor of the House during the joint session was not really a real thing, and you couldn't abide by that stupid plan. And so maybe he's a statesman now, something. But anyway, people get stuck with that stuff all the time. And as we discussed, a week or so ago, maybe Steve Scalise didn't actually say that he was David Duke without the baggage. These things happen. So that's an interesting thing. I don't know if I don't know. Well, it's an interesting explanation. Certainly could have happened. I don't know if I want to necessarily accept the National Review's spin on all that. Who wrote the piece? Now I'm curious. Let's go and take a look. I've clicked on the link. Robert W. Patterson. There we go. July 1st, 2013. Okay. Well, and it's an interesting backgrounder on this. What's that? I hear some buzzing, beeping, something going on. It might be a truck backing up outside. All right, never mind. Let's see. Heading back over to the other things we wanted to cover today. I knew there was some other stuff. Oh, yes, right. The weirdo Speaker of the House. The news story, as I mentioned, the weirdness is that he doesn't have a bank account. How weird is it? Well, it's weird enough for the Daily Beast to cover. Let me click all the way through and make sure I've got Roger Sollenberger is the byline on this before the paywall jumps up and gets in the way. But I can, never fear, I can read it to you from Pocket, although Pocket wanted me to tell you that the author of this piece was Thomas Levinson, and it's not. So, that's why I did what I did, to click through, even though they weren't going to let me read it. It's Roger Sollenberger, as it turns out. So what's the story? Newly elected House Speaker Mike Johnson does not have a bank account. That's the basics of it. Now, at least, the story continues, that's what Johnson reports on years of personal financial disclosures which date back to 2016 and reveal a financial life that, in the context of his role as a congressman and now speaker, appears extraordinarily precarious. Over the course of 7 years, Johnson has never reported a checking or savings account in his name, nor in the name of his wife or any of his children, disclosures show. In fact, he doesn't appear to have money stashed in any investments, with his latest filing covering 2022 showing no assets whatsoever. I mean, this is a grown-ass man. And I would love to know what the actual situation is, and I imagine that he'll have a press conference and attempt to explain it today, and I guess we'll see whether it makes any sense. Maybe not him, maybe a spokesperson. But yeah, that strikes me as unusual. And like I said, usually you hear Republicans are the ones saying, well, common sense, budgeting, and sit around the kitchen table. No. But people who sit around the kitchen table have bank accounts. Like, I don't know. I'd love to know either what complex situation is he using to hide his money, or what's happening to all of it. And does he, right, imagine him telling us about, we got to have common sense and budget like it, just like regular families do. And he's cashing all his checks and running away with the money, or burying it in coffee cans, or spending it all. I don't know. But now I really kind of am interested just to find out how he's handling things. Of course, it's unlikely Johnson doesn't actually have a bank account. It is unlikely, don't you think? What's more likely is Johnson lives paycheck to paycheck, so much so that he doesn't have enough money in his bank account to trigger the checking account disclosure rules for members of Congress. Like maybe it has to be over X amount before you have to disclose it. And, he puts his paycheck in the bank and he pays his bills. And at the end of the month, there's $1,000 left in the balance. And then he gets paid again just in time to pay the rest of his bills. But his wife has the counseling. And I don't know, maybe nobody's buying that stupid counseling because it was kind of dumb. We didn't actually get into how dumb it was. Just that it was dumb. I vaguely hinted to you that it was dumb and weird. Maybe I could tell you the details of that at some point today or tomorrow. Anyway, so there you go. House Ethics Committee filing guidelines state that members must disclose bank accounts they have at every financial institution as long as the account holds at least $1,000 and the combined value of all the accounts, including those belonging to their spouse and dependent children, exceeds $5,000. Maybe that's not the case for him. The rules cover all interest-bearing cash deposit accounts at banks, credit unions, and savings and loans associations, including checking, savings, money market accounts, along with certificates of deposit and individual retirement funds. Now, it says here, Johnson reported receiving $10,485.53 distribution from a New York Life IRA in 2017, his first year in office, possibly from a retirement account that he had listed the previous year. And certainly not uncommon for Americans in general to have less than $5,000 in their bank account. Most Americans, 57%, couldn't handle an unexpected $1,000 expense, according to a report earlier this year. And the median amount that Americans keep in their bank account is $5,300. But Johnson's household income puts him in the top 12% of earners in the United States. And it's extraordinarily rare for members of Congress to not list a qualifying bank account, let alone zero assets whatsoever. The Daily Beast reached out to Johnson's office for comment, but didn't receive a reply. Brett Capel, a government ethics expert at Harman Curran, told the Daily Beast it would be very unusual for a member to not to have to disclose at least one bank account. Jordan Leibowitz, communications director for watchdog group Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, offered a more blunt assessment, saying that if Johnson truly doesn't have any assets, it raises questions about his personal financial well-being. It's strange to see Speaker Johnson disclose no assets, Leibowitz told the Daily Beast. He made over $200,000 last year, and his wife took home salary from two employers as well. So why isn't there a bank account or any form of savings listed? Johnson also has carried debts over for several years, which Leibowitz said would sharpen the question. He owes hundreds of thousands of dollars between a mortgage, personal loan, home equity line of credit. So where did that money go? Leibowitz said. If he truly has no bank account and no assets, it raises questions about his personal financial well-being. And I mean, that's not a scandal by itself, right? I don't think so, but, well, you got to see things explained in order to be sure. That fact, he said, could be seen as a vulnerability to exploit. One of the reasons we have these financial disclosures is to know whether politicians are having financial difficulties, which could make them ripe for influence buying, Leibowitz said. True, good point. Johnson's financial disclosures paint a picture of a man of modest means, the Wall Street Journal reported this week. But, I mean, what's modest by Wall Street Journal standards? I don't know. I mean, like I said, $200,000 in income plus his wife's money. He doesn't have 13,000 kids, right? Anyway, he doesn't appear to have a negative net worth, unlike the negative $671,000 worth that Roll Call once put on another recent contender for the speakership race, Steve Scalise. I didn't realize that. Johnson's Benton, Louisiana home is valued at around $600,000, according to a Zillow estimate. Sometimes they overstate things, but okay. The home's value, along with his income, would cover his reported liabilities, so he's not negative. Bossier Parish, that's the name of it. Bossier, maybe they say. Parish records show he is up to date on his taxes, so that's good news for him. And for the people of the parish as well. The year before joining Congress, Johnson reported over $200,000 in combined income, a total he and his wife seem to clear annually. He topped that number again last year, reporting his $174,000 federal salary, along with roughly $30,000 from his Liberty University online teaching gig, a steady side hustle. Johnson first reported in 2019. His wife also reported income last year from two nonprofit groups, her Onward Christian Education. Oh, it's a different one. Onward Christian Education Services, not Onward Christian Counseling Services. It's a different one. And from Louisiana Right to Life Educational Committee. That's a PAC, it sounds like to me. Members aren't required to disclose how much money their spouses earn, just the sources. But two of Johnson's previous reports do provide a dollar amount showing about $50,000 in those years from various clients. His latest disclosures just say not applicable, NA, right? In all, Johnson and his wife appear to have steadily earned more than $200K each year, which will see a nice bump under his $223,500 salary as Speaker. However, they do face some steep costs, among them raising 4 children and a second place for Johnson to crash while he's in D.C. That is very costly, and 4 kids ain't cheap either. But okay, while Johnson might not have money in a bank, he does have a relationship with them. That is, he deals with banks on the liability side, with his disclosures revealing 3 debts at Citizens National Bank, a 2013 home mortgage valued between $250,000 and $500,000, big range, a personal loan from 2016 between $15,000 and $50,000, and a home equity line of credit that he took out in 2019 for an additional amount between $15,000 and $50,000. He also appears to have a relationship with bankers. In 2019, the Louisiana Bankers Association issued a press release showing Johnson meeting with executives from a number of banks, including Citizens National, which owns all of Johnson's liabilities, including that line of credit that he had taken out earlier that year. Just, something to watch. Another one of those liabilities, Johnson's 2016 personal loan, has been paid down. That loan, which was pegged between $50,000 and $100,000 on his first disclosure, went down to between $15,000 and $50,000, the next reporting range, on his second disclosure. Neither that debt nor the others has changed since. But Johnson's retirement savings do seem to be dwindling. In his first filing as a candidate in 2016, Johnson only lists a state government fidelity retirement account valued between $1,000 and $15,000. That year, Johnson reported earning about $171,000 from legal work at Kitchens Law and his own practice, in addition to his $25,000 salary from the Louisiana House of Representatives. Kitchens Law, that's the name of the firm, huh? And I'm sure they sit down around kitchen tables, too, and decide with common sense what to do with their finances. Johnson appears to have carried that retirement account over to a federal program called a Thrift Savings Plan. That's the congressional scheme. He put some money into that account, topping out between $15,000 and $50,000 in 2020. The previous year, Johnson had taken out the line of credit on his home. In 2021, he appears to have cashed out that retirement account entirely. Wow. And it does not appear at all on his 2022 report. Johnson also doesn't list any accounts with the Congressional Federal Credit Union, a frequently used institution among House members following the congressional check-bouncing scandal of the 1990s. Even the notoriously opaque Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas has disclosed a CFCU account. It's an interesting reference there, too. It's a weird thing to say that a frequently used institution after the check-bouncing scandal. I mean, sorta, kinda, but it's just a regular credit union that, Hill employees use. Members do too, because it's got branches right there on in the House office buildings. So super convenient. And I guess, there were members, prior to the check bouncing scandal, you could cash checks at the Congressional Post Office, which was a weird thing and a weird holdover. Although people do talk about post office banking all the time as a possibility to revive, but they didn't really have any particular need members didn't have a need for joining the Congressional Federal Credit Union because you could cash your checks there. Although, I don't know, these days not a whole lot of people just cashing their whole paychecks when they're getting paid in the $170,000 range, but okay. Anyway, Post office there no longer does that. So if you want to cash checks or just take care of your banking, it pays to join CFCU. As Johnson takes the speaker's reins, his entire life, personal and political, is under new scrutiny. While a low net worth is far from the worst disclosure about Johnson, it's revealing in several ways. For one, his complete lack of assets shows that for a conservative, Johnson isn't as conservative with his own finances as he strives to be with the federal government's. For another, it could be indicative of his post-Congress plans, right? So he could have an eye on cashing out and becoming a lobbyist at some point and making enough money to retire with, which he'll probably, which opportunity he might seek to secure by advancing legislation that would be beneficial to somebody who might hire him for big bucks later. That's important to know. With Johnson appearing to not even have a single dollar in the stock market, a savings account, or a retirement plan, the new speaker may have plans to use his congressional position as a springboard to something more lucrative once he's done in government. That could happen once he's and I guess some editor missed that they then said that could happen once he's done in government, which you just said. But if the new speaker sees a boon while in office, he certainly wouldn't be the first member of Congress to do so. And I guess linking to more stories about more people who really made a bundle for some crazy reason while serving in Congress. And I'm sure there are members of both parties that have done that. Both sides, Yargle, Bargle, et cetera, et cetera. You get the idea. Anyway, that's kind of weird. But, as others pointed out, the story by itself isn't necessarily scandalous or worrisome. It is a little odd, that's for sure, and bears further investigation. But as others have pointed out, prior to serving in Congress, he has been handed the reins of at least two fairly niche organizations that, that really dovetailed nicely with his biblical worldview kind of thing. One handling, I guess, the legal affairs and PR for that weird Noah's Ark theme park / replica that they built in Kentucky. And that apparently was, he had actually hoped to snag government subsidies for and tax breaks, etc. And then they were finally yanked as the various levels of government realized this is not the sort of thing that we should be spending taxpayer money on. And then it went under, and it went under in a pile of, recriminations by various people involved that the other ones were doing something wrong. There's financial improprieties. There's a bankruptcy involved. Between that and the fact that he was also apparently at one point, here, according to the AP's latest report, the inaugural dean of a Christian law school that apparently also never actually opened its doors, which is kind of a weird thing too. Brian Slodisco is the reporter for this one for the AP. Before House Speaker Mike Johnson was elected to public office, he was dean of a small Baptist law school that didn't exist, and yet, paid him. But it's not impossible to imagine. You pay somebody to do the background work that it takes to start such a school, and then, hey, it doesn't work out, right? But what can you do? The establishment of the Judge Paul Pressler School of Law was supposed to be a capstone achievement for Louisiana College, which administrators boasted would unashamedly embrace a biblical worldview. Okay. I mean, not really okay, but we've heard of such things. But we'll come back to, if you heard the name of the law school and said, wait a minute, we'll get to that. But if you heard the name of the law school and said, who cares? Well, don't worry. We'll get to why you should care or why it's interesting. Anyway, instead of actually opening and embracing unashamedly this biblical worldview, it collapsed roughly a decade ago without enrolling students or opening its doors amid infighting by officials, accusations of financial impropriety, and difficulty obtaining accreditation, which frightened away would-be donors, which is also, something else to keep in mind. The Speaker of the House, he's the leading fundraiser and has to be for his conference. And I thought that he would have easy access to fundraising through the Alliance Defending Freedom, which does raise a tremendous amount of money. But I guess the track record on Johnson is that he's actually a terrible fundraiser and everything he touches goes bankrupt, except, so far the Alliance Defending Freedom. But maybe eventually we could hope for that. There is no indication that Johnson engaged in wrongdoing while employed by the private college, now known as Louisiana Christian University. So they still exist. The law school doesn't. But as a virtually unknown player in Washington, the episode offers insight into how Johnson navigated leadership challenges that echo the chaos, feuding, and hard-right politics that have come to define the Republican House majority he now leads. That's a better point, right? The chapter is just the latest to surface since the four-term congressman's improbable election as Speaker last week following the ouster of Kevin McCarthy, and a reminder of his long-standing ties to the Christian right, which is now a dominant force in GOP politics. There's more, and we'll return to the article and see what we can tie together. But it is very interesting that, everything he's been tied to before has been a bit of a flop. Here, try the House of Representatives. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Whew, okay, let's take a look back and continue on with the AP piece, which, has some real relevance in all of this and, might come to mean something. Anyway, where were we with this? We just left off saying, since this is the latest chapter to surface in the four-term congressman's improbable election, and perhaps the chaos of trying to launch and then failing to launch this law school has some parallels in the job of running a rather chaotic Republican House. It's also a milestone that he does not typically mention when discussing a pre-Congress resume that includes work as a litigator for conservative Christian groups that fiercely opposed gay rights and abortion, as well as his brief tenure as a Louisiana lawmaker who pushed legislation that sanctioned discrimination for religious reasons. It's A-OK. Johnson's office declined to make him available for an interview and did not offer a comment for this story. The law school deal was really an anomaly, said Gene Mills, a longtime friend of Johnson's. It was a great idea. Well, maybe. But due to issues that were out of Mike's hands, that came unraveled. J. Michael Johnson Esquire, as he was then known professionally, which suggests that what's the J for? We could probably look in Wikipedia and find out. But, that is interesting. Now I'm curious. Like, when people drop the first name, I'm always interested in why they do that. Let's see. Mike Johnson, Louisiana politician. James Michael Johnson. So Jim Johnson. Now I am. Okay. That would create some, I don't know. There's nothing real problem with it, but I guess he doesn't like alliteration, perhaps. Okay. James Johnson or Jim Johnson, but he goes by Mike instead. Fine. Maybe his dad was James Johnson. Yeah, you never know. Anyway, no scandal there. I feel confident in saying that. But he did used to use the J anyway, while he was an esquire. Okay. Well, as he was then known professionally, he was hired in 2010 to be the inaugural dean, and that's in quotes for some reason, of the Judge Paul Pressler School of Law, named for a Southern Baptist Convention luminary who was instrumental in the faith group's turn to the political right in the 1980s. So, you know, like renaming the George Mason University School of Law for Antonin Scalia. They too wanted to pick a conservative hero to name their school after. Any discussion of this at some point in this article? Maybe not, but don't worry, we'll get to it later. The board of trustees who brought Johnson on board included Tony Perkins, remember him? A longtime mentor who is now the president of the Family Research Council in Washington, a powerhouse, or used to be powerhouse, Christian lobbying organization that the Southern Poverty Law Center classifies as an anti-gay hate group. In early public remarks, Johnson predicted a bright future for the school. That was the job. And college officials hoped it would someday rival the law school at Liberty University, the evangelical institution founded by the Reverend Jerry Falwell, which likewise has more or less, well, not collapsed, but certainly lapsed into scandal and disgrace, having been handled by Falwell's son, who, I don't know, let's say some significant percentage of moral leaders of the Republican right turned out to be less than secret perv, actually, and whatever. You remember that story. Anyway, doesn't matter. That's not the one he ran. From a pure feasibility standpoint, Johnson said, I'm not sure how this can fail. I mean, what a visionary, right? Put him in charge of the House. This, according to the Daily Town Talk, a newspaper in Alexandria, Louisiana. And he added that it looked like the perfect storm for our law school, but reality soon intruded. For several years before Johnson's arrival, the college had been in a state of turmoil following a board takeover by conservatives, that's their usual plan, who felt the school had become too liberal. Sounds familiar. They implemented policies that restricted academic freedoms, including the potential firing of instructors whose curriculum touched upon sexual morality or teachings contradictory to the Bible. Aren't they trying that now in some other places? And they think, no one's ever tried this before, and it's bound to be a tremendous success. It led to the collapse of this law school for whatever reason. So I guess watch out or don't. Wink, wink. See what happens. The school's president and other faculty resigned. The college was placed on probation by an accreditation agency. But a shale oil boom, who would have thought that would come to the rescue, in the area also brought a wave of prosperity from newly enriched donors. And school officials, led by President Joe Aguilar, had grand ambitions beyond just the law school. They were going to build an ark, I guess, which included a medical school as a possibility, a film school, and making a movie adaptation of the 1960s pastoral comedy TV show Green Acres. What an eye for business. Everyone was clamoring. I recall a gritty reboot of Green Acres, but with a Christian bent. And no one will make that because everyone knows it's probably box office poison. Well, we'll start our own film school then. How about that? Bringing Johnson into the school's leadership helped further those ambitions, somehow. A dean of the proposed law school, as dean, Johnson embarked on a major fundraising campaign and described a big dollar event in Houston with former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, then Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal, and Pressler, according to an account Johnson wrote in a 2011 alumni magazine. So, now he's got to take over as fundraiser-in-chief for the House Republicans. How did he do? Big-time fundraiser, big dollar event, Mike Huckabee, Bobby Jindal, major fundraising campaign. How did this end? Bankruptcy and recriminations of financial improprieties. Well, that ain't good. I mean, except insofar as it is. But Well, he struggled to draw an adequate amount of cash, as it turns out. While drama percolated behind the scenes, that culminated in a flurry, or as most people say, flurry of lawsuits, including a whistleblower claim by a school vice president who accused not Johnson, but Aguilar, of misappropriating money and lying to the board, according to court records. A law firm, brought in to conduct an investigation, later concluded in a 2013 report that Aguilar had inappropriately diverted funds to a school the institution hoped to build in Africa, as well as for personal expenses. Aguilar declined to comment on Tuesday, citing health reasons. But don't worry, he's covered by Obamacare. Meanwhile, the historic former federal courthouse in Shreveport that was selected as the law school's campus, that's ambitious, required at least $20 million in renovations. The environment turned untenable after the school was denied accreditation to issue Juris Doctorate degrees. That's a major thing for a law school. And major donors backed away from their financial pledges. Mike worked diligently to assemble a very elite faculty and curriculum, said Gilbert Little, who was involved in the effort. But fundraising for a small private college is very, very difficult. It's almost as if you have to have some sort of expertise, and just carrying a Bible around won't do the trick. Weird. That is interesting. And let's assemble a very elite faculty and curriculum, like, what's her name? Barry Weiss and the fake university that she came up with down in, Texas? Johnson resigned in the fall of 2012 and went back to litigating for Christian causes. He also started a new pro bono firm, Freedom Guard, which Perkins served as a director, business filing show. I wonder whether his wife said, how about a not pro bono firm? We could use some money. Well, he was dedicated to his cause anyway. 5 years later, Pressler, the school's namesake, we had to get around to it eventually. Why is it weird? Sued in a civil case that has since grown. What kind of case? To include allegations of abuse by multiple men who say he sexually assaulted them, some when they were children. Well, if it wasn't so common and par for the course, I might be shocked that a central figure in the Southern Baptist Convention and a judge and a conservative hero for which you would name your law school turns out to be, well, a bit of a child molester. Anyway, that matter, which is still pending in court, helped spark a broader reckoning by the Southern Baptist Convention over its handling of claims of sexual abuse. Little said the school was named after Pressler because he had a close relationship, wink, wink, with the institution's leaders. Johnson didn't stray entirely from the school. He represented the college for 6 more years in a case challenging a mandate in then-President Barack Obama's health care law, we're back to that required employers to provide workers access to birth control, court records show. It was the type of case that has defined his legal career. The 51-year-old Johnson was born in Shreveport, Louisiana, though he doesn't sound like it, the eldest of 4 children in what was described as a traditional Christian household. How else would you describe it? Right, of course. Tragedy struck, I didn't know that, when Johnson was 12. His father, Pat, he's not named after him, a Shreveport firefighter and hazardous materials specialist, yikes, was critically injured when ammonia gas leaking inside a cold storage facility exploded during an emergency repair, leaving him permanently disabled while killing his partner. Wow. None of our lives would ever be the same again, his son wrote years later in a commentary piece published in the Shreveport Times. I wonder what happened there. Johnson and his wife Kelly married in 1999, entering into a covenant marriage, which both have touted for the difficulty it poses to obtaining a divorce. And the couple served as a public face of an effort by evangelical conservatives to promote such marriages. No money involved there, I guess. In 2005, Kelly Johnson told ABC News that she viewed anything less, as marriage light. So it's not only that you don't have the right to marry as a same-sex couple, other couples who are in heterosexual marriages, aren't really married unless they're in a covenant marriage. You've got some sort of lesser, which is interesting because I'm curious of whether she ever decided or thought it would be a good idea for Mike or her or both to lobby to end the right that heterosexual couples might have to anything less than what they had entered into. It really isn't covenant marriage, the only legal marriage. And they probably never pressed that because that would be enormously unpopular and crazy. But it's interesting because when we were dealing in the early days with, well, how are we going to cope with same-sex marriage, which we really have to get around to legalizing. And like for a while we proposed, well, there'll be civil unions, etc., or something like that. Maybe we could try that. And the objection was, well, we don't want anything less than marriage. It's interesting. I just kind of wonder whether Kelly Johnson or anybody else ever said, well, you know, if you don't have a covenant marriage, you have marriage light. And we shouldn't allow marriage light either. God wants marriage heavy, presumably, whatever that might be. It's an interesting question. But, you know, they're never asked to examine the internal contradictions of their foolishness. So we won't do it here either. Johnson has said he was the first in his family to graduate college, enrolling at Louisiana State University, where he earned a law degree in 1998. He also worked on the 1996 Senate campaign of Louis Woody Jenkins, where he had an early brush with a contested election. Jenkins, a conservative state lawmaker, narrowly lost to Democrat Mary Landrieu amid allegations of voter fraud, including ballots cast by dead people and voters who were paid. Does sound familiar, doesn't it? A subsequent investigation by the Senate's then Republican majority found no evidence to prove that fraud or irregularities affected the outcome of the election. What do you know? As it happens every time, even when investigating the election of a Democrat, for some reason, Republicans at the top levels come up with, nah, there wasn't any. That's weird. But in the wake of Trump's 2020 election loss, of course, in which Johnson played a leading role in disputing, the congressman offered a differing view of the decades-old contest while describing himself as a young law student carrying around everyone's briefcases. Even though we had all the evidence all wrapped up, Johnson told Louisiana radio host Moon Griffin, remember him? We mentioned him the other day. In 2020, the Senate put it in a closet and never looked at it again. So he's convinced that he, once again, had proven the fraud, and official Washington, even Republicans, turned away from it. And that's why it's important to make me Speaker of the House, so they'll never turn away from it again, even though it's fake. Anyway, even though Jenkins lost, Johnson drew notice from conservative activists who worked on the campaign. Among them was Perkins, the founder of the Louisiana Family Forum, who has long promoted an existential clash between pious Christians and decadent liberals. He did not respond to a request for comment. From liberals. Mills, who? We must have mentioned him earlier, and I've already forgotten who Mills is. But Mills is a longtime Perkins confidant who now leads the Louisiana Family Forum, since Perkins has moved on to the national level, I guess, called Johnson's ascension to House Speaker a wonderful day in America, adding, if you don't believe God is at work in the midst of this, then you aren't paying attention. Okay. I'm glad to know that God said that he didn't want Jim Jordan as Speaker. Okay. Anyway, of his initial interactions with Johnson, Mills said he just glowed. The reality is Mike added value wherever he went. And that was evident from the early days, Mills said. Could be that he added value, just not enough to, on net, have there be positive value in either the ARC thing or this law school. Soon, Johnson was representing the group and others during his roughly decade-long tenure as an attorney for the Alliance Defense Fund, a nonprofit legal organization still in its infancy, which presented itself as a bulwark for traditional family values, even though it was a reactionary force for garbage. The group is no longer an upstart, now known as the Alliance Defending Freedom, or ADF. The organization raised over $100 million in 2022. That's why I thought he'd be better at fundraising. And conceived the legal strategy that led to the Supreme Court last year in overturning the constitutional right to an abortion. Among other conservative wins it helped secure from the High Court, more connected to cakes than anything else. But much of Johnson's early work for ADF was far more prosaic. In court and before public boards, he represented conservatives on issues related to the exercise of faith in schools and alcohol regulations, interesting, as well as zoning disputes over casinos and strip clubs. But Johnson's vehement opposition to the burgeoning gay rights movement in the mid-2000s soon garnered greater attention. In 2004, Johnson and the ADF filed suit seeking to overturn a New Orleans law that allowed same-sex partners of city workers to receive health benefits, which a judge rejected. He also wrote a semi-regular guest column in the Shreveport Times, where his defenses of, quote, religious liberty included stridently anti-gay rhetoric, including a prediction that same-sex marriage would be a, quote, dark harbinger of chaos and sexual anarchy that could doom even the strongest republic. Our republic is perhaps doomed, but few people point to that as the cause. If we change marriage for this tiny modern minority, we will have to do it for every deviant group. Polygamists, polyamorous, pedophiles, and others will be next in line to claim equal protection, he wrote in July 2004, as previously reported by CNN. Okay, so more about his previous biases, but that's mostly stuff we knew about. Is there anything else that we hadn't heard yet? Let me sort of scan down here. More opposition to gay rights, sought to block a voter-approved state constitutional amendment that prohibited civil unions. Okay. Oh, I see. Okay. In 2004, he represented Louisiana Family Forum in opposing a case filed by gay rights supporters who sought to block a voter-approved state constitutional amendment that prohibited civil unions. I knew civil unions would come into this somewhere along the lines. Nothing really unusual or that hasn't been discussed before, but let's see. Anything else here? Sponsorship of anti-gay marriage legislation while a state representative. Okay, I mean, I think that really, we've gotten to the end of this thing, but I just wanted to throw out there the idea of the Christian law school that he was put in charge of and that just somehow, for whatever reason, never took off. Like the ARC thing, and I don't know. It's a bit less of a substantive track record than you might want from somebody who's going to be placed in charge of running a rather important institution. All right, let's see. There was more that I wanted to share, and you know what? Maybe today is the day. I should get some of this out of the way so that I can clear the decks for some other things. Oh, and you know, I have some recorded segments from multiple sources, and in fact, Rosalind McGregor has given us a new one from Michigan, but perhaps I'll save that one for tomorrow. But maybe I ought to, sooner rather than later, just play you this one, and we've got just enough time to get it in here. A very short piece here, but from longtime listener and occasional contributor John Ronald, who has done us this service. And I'll give you a link to the actual item too, so you can take a look at it. If you are in Texas, you've got an election coming up too. There is a ballot guide that has been issued by Progress Texas that deals with the various ballot initiatives there in Texas. This is of interest. You know, several states have this process by which the voters are handed these questions directly, and sometimes they just don't get a great deal of attention. Certainly not as much attention, say, as they're giving in Ohio to their Measure 1 dealing with abortion there. But if you're in Texas, and I understand that there are a lot of people in Texas. I don't know how many listeners are in Texas, but statistically, there's got to be more than just John, right? So what he's done is, heading into the election that'll happen next Tuesday, the Progressive Texas Guide to the ballot questions. He's just going to read quickly through them, and I'll provide you a link if you want to give it further examination so that you have some indication of maybe what you ought to be considering doing with your vote on those ballot questions. Let's listen to John read through their guide.
Hello, David. So while Texas does not have initiative, referendum, and recall, we do have constitutional amendments that are proposed by the legislature. We're basically in the same boat as Kansas in that regard.
I see.
I appreciate the League of Women Voters putting out voting guides for us and giving us nonpartisan for and against arguments. But I thought that listeners might want to have an actual progressive guide to the upcoming Texas election. We're in currently early voting period with the election coming up very soon. So I just wanted to run through the propositions that are on the ballot and this is from Progress Texas, which is a progressive organization, and they have given us a progressive guide to the Texas amendments that are up for a vote. So I just want to run through them quickly. Proposition 1, vote no. It removes local control, enabling large industrial factory farms to operate with less accountability. Proposition 2, vote yes. Child care is essential for parents, particularly mothers, and contributes to economic growth. Proposition 3, vote no. This could hinder future Texans' flexibility to write tax laws so that it will reflect the will of the people in the future. Proposition 4 is a toss-up. Lawmakers shouldn't have prioritized allotment, but it's progressive for homeowners. Proposition 5, vote yes. Universities have earned the research investment dollars the Texas University Fund endowment grants. Proposition 6 is a yes, but ... Texas's water infrastructure needs updating, but funds can be used on fracking water. So that's not great. Prop 7, vote no. No new gas plants, no taxpayer subsidies for wealthy polluter companies when renewable energy strengthens our grid. Prop 8, vote yes. Close the digital divide for 7 million Texans without access to broadband. Prop 9, vote yes. Release these funds. This COLA is the first raise some educators will see in nearly 20 years. This one is a personal note to me. My mom is a retired Texas teacher, so this would help us a lot. Prop 10, vote no. Eliminating property taxes on biomed equipment will reduce funds for our public schools. Prop 11, vote yes. Parks and recreation facilities benefit residents and encourage economic development. Prop 12, vote no. Let's keep the role of the treasurer from being easily controlled. Prop 13, vote yes. Extending the mandatory retirement age will alleviate turnover amongst present elected judges. Prop 14, vote yes. Secure new parks for future generations of Texans to explore and enjoy. So those are the main propositions. There are also local, obviously, items that will be on your ballot. They may vary from area to area, but those are the statewide ballot initiatives. And just thought Texans who wanted to know how a progressive Democrat should vote in that should have that information readily to hand. So thank you and good day.
All right. Well, thanks, John. And I know that was about as efficiently as you could do it. And I mean, that was a quick run through, what was it, 13, 14 proposed amendments, I guess. So I'll have a link to the written product for you in the roundup. And of course, if you missed that and you want that link, we can provide it to you. Yeah, shoot me a social media notice or via email or something like that, and I can send it to you. I'm sure that there's greater information available that would explain the actual proposition. But I mean, long story short, this is how progressives, it is suggested, ought to view these things, and a quick vote guide. Yes, no, or do what you want on this one, or what have you. But if you're looking for more in-depth explanation as to how, what the proposition is about and how they got to that decision, that is available, I'm sure, as well. But I'll send you the guide. And but just a quick reminder, if you're in Texas, you got a lot of work ahead of you if you haven't voted yet during the early voting period, just on these statewide propositions, plus some local items as well. That you're going to have to look up for yourself, but a good idea to prepare people heading into the weekend. Okay. Almost out of time here. Maybe tomorrow we'll return to the weirdness with Kelly Johnson's counseling practice and exactly where the philosophy behind it came from. But for now, I just wanted to return quickly to another thing we raised the other day. The weird proposition from Mike Johnson, again, to offset Israel aid with cuts to the IRS. And I said, that's, well, one, you don't even really need to offset emergency spending like this. And two, if you're going to, it's not a good idea to offset it with something that costs the government more money than what you're cutting out of the budget. And I wondered how the CEO would deal with it. Well, CBO rather would deal with it. And here's a hint. The GOP plan to, quote, offset Israel aid with IRS cuts would backfire, budget experts warn. This from The Hill. Tobias Burns and Aris Foley reporting on this. There was also, I think, a Punchbowl News item about it. But basically, recent proposal by House Republicans to take billions of dollars from the IRS and give it to Israel for its war against Hamas is raising alarm from budget experts who say the push would undercut the party's calls that is the Republican Party's calls, to reduce the national debt. Since assuming control of the House in January, House Republicans have targeted what they described as wasteful spending by Democrats. GOP leaders have, of course, proposed steep cuts to tackle the national debt, but budget experts argue a Monday bill from House Republicans, which would take $14.3 billion away from the IRS, will expand the national debt by tens of billions of dollars over the next decade. The cuts would also hamstring efforts to close the tax gap, hundreds of billions of dollars that the government is owed every year but fails to collect. Paying for new spending by defunding tax enforcement is worse than not paying for it at all, said Maya McGuinness, president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, in a Monday statement. CRFB estimated the GOP plan would add more than $30 billion to the debt. Instead of avoiding new borrowing, this plan doubles down on it, McGuinness said. Howard Gleckman, senior fellow at the Urban Brookings Tax Policy Center at the Urban Institute, said it was pretty clear that cutting this kind of IRS funding would actually increase the deficit. So we had it pretty much dead to rights there. We had it correct. And now the CBO is working on it. They determine how various pieces of legislation affect the national deficit. They're in the process of scoring the bill. Deborah Kilroe, communications director for the CBO, told The Hill in an email on Tuesday morning. The White House has already promised to veto the bill, and for good reason. Let me see if there's if that item from Punch Bowl actually I think does have something from the CBO on it. Punch Bowl News put embedded in Scribd the CBO's report on it. And, this is going to be difficult to scan through on the air because A, it's small type, and B, it's numbers and charts and figures and all sorts of things. But I guess putting the official imprimatur on it, CBO is basically, giving them the thumbs down on this and saying just what we thought they would end up saying, that this is actually not only a political gimmick, but a terrible budgetary gimmick that about as bad as it could be for those interested in cutting the deficit. They will actually increase it. So, whoops. Anyway, all right. That leaves us about out of time for today. Still plenty to catch up on tomorrow. I can see tomorrow running away from us already. But we'll get back to some of these things and maybe a closer look at what happened on the floor of the Senate yesterday so you can understand a little bit better who the players were and all of this. But time now for us to turn things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next right here on Netroots Radio.
From netrootsradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, let's see what he's got on top here today. Oh, anti-Semitic messages. Boo. Found painted outside of the famous Cantor's Deli in the Fairfax district of Los Angeles. Being investigated now as a possible hate crime. And a small-town newspaper publisher and reporter in Alabama arrested after authorities accused them of publishing an article that revealed information about grand jury investigations. Stay tuned.